I remember the morning vividly. Mom's voice came first, slicing through the hallway like a blade wrapped in sugar. Dawn spit be late, okay? I paused, halfway out of my room, comb in hand. The words sounded ordinary, harmless even, but her eyes weren't. They were sharp, worried, maybe even scared. My chest tightened without reason. Yeah, I'll be fine, I said, shrugging it off. I wanted to sound casual, normal, brave, but my voice cracked a little. Mom frowned, muttering something under her breath, and went back to the kitchen. Dad didn't say anything. He never did, just nodded at me with that distant look, like he had his own universe to manage. I wanted him to reach out, to say, "Be careful," anything, but silence was his love language. I got ready quickly, rehearsing the lines I'd say at the interview, imagining the handshake, the nod of approval, the way my future could finally be mine, not theirs. Not Mom and Dad's expectations, just mine. I could almost taste it. Freedom, recognition, respect. Mom appeared again, leaning against the doorframe. "Promise me you won't dawdle. Don't let anyone." Her words stopped. She bit her lip, glanced at Dad, and shook her head. "I promise," I said. She nodded. Her eyes softened for a moment, then hardened. Something in the way she looked at me made me look away. I didn't need warnings. I had my own path. I had my own fire. The morning sun hit my face as I stepped outside. I inhaled deep. Freedom smelled like gasoline and asphalt. I turned back for one last wave. Mom was already gone. Dad still standing in the doorway, silent. The lock clicked behind me. I didn't notice. I never noticed. The ride to the interview was a blur of imagined success. My heart was full of hope, my mind buzzing with plans. The world was mine for the taking. At the interview, I smiled. I laughed. I answered questions I had rehearsed 100 times. The panel looked impressed. I could feel it, the shift, the moment where I would finally step out of the shadow of their doubts. Then a text. "Call us when you get home. Important." From Mom. I laughed. Important. What could be so important? I called. Silence. Then Dad Sepp's voice. Low, controlled. "We need to talk. Now." I frowned. I sepped him at the interview. "Can it wait?" "No." The line went dead. My stomach turned. My hands shook. Something was off. Something I couldn't see yet. When I got home, I couldn't open the door. No key. No spare. Nothing. Just the cold metal between me and the life I thought I knew. I banged. Knocked. Shouted. Mom Sepp's voice came from inside. "You shouldn't have left." "What? Why?" "You ignored the warning." My head spun. My chest burned. Confusion mixed with fear, with anger, with betrayal. I couldn't yet name. Dad appeared behind her, expression blank. "I told you," he said. "Told me what?" "Not to trust anyone." The words hit harder than any slap. Harder than any accusation. The world I knew, my family, my home, the people I believed in, shifted beneath my feet. I stood there on the porch, the key in my hand useless, the door locked, and the truth whispered at the edges of my mind. Sometimes the people who love you the most are the ones who can hurt you the deepest. And that day planted a seed I didn't understand yet, but it was growing, quietly, patiently, and one day it would bloom. Betrayal was waiting, and so was I. I came back hours later, heart still buzzing from the interview, from hope. The front door was bolted, from the inside. I knocked, hard, once, twice, then a dozen times. My knuckles stung, but it didn't matter. "Hello?" I called. My voice sounded small, weak. Silence. Then laughter. First my sister's, light, teasing, like I was a joke she'd been waiting to tell. "Ah, look who finally decided to come home." I froze. My stomach dropped. "What? What are you doing?" Mom Septa's voice came next. Calm, smug, "Don't step bother knocking. Sweetie. You are not coming in." I pressed my ear to the door. The sound of Dad chuckled, low and measured, filling the room behind the wall. "You should Sepp listen this morning." I staggered back, heart hammering. My hands shook. "Why?" I whispered. My own voice betrayed me. "You always think you know better," Mom said, almost gently, but I could hear the edge. The venom hidden beneath sugar. I laughed. a bitter, broken sound. I was your child, your family. How can you? Family doesn't always mean what you think, Dad said, cutting me off. Sister giggled again. Oh, come on, you should have seen your face. I sank to the ground, the grass sharp beneath my fingers, cold against my skin. My chest ached with the shock, each heartbeat a punch I couldn't block. I tried calling again, phone after phone. No answer. Voicemails went ignored. Do you like feeling left out? Mom asked, her voice a whisper now, meant only for me to hear through the door. I slammed my palm against the wood. Stop it. The door didn't step budge. I sank onto the backyard steps. The world I had known, the home I had trusted, was gone, shattered, replaced by this cold, cruel version of reality. I traced their voices through the walls like weapons cutting into me. My sister's laughter, Mom's smirk, Dad's low chuckle, it all layered into a song of betrayal. I couldn't escape. I wanted to scream, to run, to break something, to make them feel even a fraction of what I felt. But my body froze. Shock made me small, invisible. I remembered the morning, the warning I ignored. The tightness in Mom's eyes, the strange distance in Dad's nod. I should have listened. I should have stayed. Why? Why are you doing this? I asked again, barely more than a whisper. You'll understand soon enough, Dad said, his tone flat. Final. Hours passed. The sun started to drop. Shadows stretched across the lawn, long and accusing. I sat there on the curb, feeling smaller than I had ever felt. I felt the first crack in what I thought was solid: trust. The first rule of family hit me. Hard trust can be weaponized. I remembered every time I had confided in them, every secret I had shared, every favor I had done, every expectation I had met, and now, nothing. Every word, every action, they could use it all against me. I thought about my sister, laughing. Was it really just teasing? Or a warning? A practice in cruelty? I pressed my hands to my face, hiding tears I refused to shed publicly. This wasn't just anger, this was betrayal in its purest form. Sharp, cold, relentless. I remembered walking in that morning, believing the world would reward effort, believing in family. I had been naive, blind. And now I was instead. I stood slowly, brushing dirt off my jeans. The weight of isolation pressed on me, suffocating and heavy. Every instinct screamed to fight, to strike, to tear the walls down, but I didn't yet know how. I sat back on the curb a moment longer, breathing, listening, counting, their voices echoing through the house, each laugh, each smirk, a reminder I was outnumbered, underestimated, ignored. But in that cold, lonely evening, a spark formed inside me. Not yet vengeance, not yet action, just recognition, awareness, power. I didn't need to cry here on this curb. I didn't need them to see me broken. I needed to understand, to remember, to survive. Because betrayal like this, it doesn't just hurt, it teaches. And it whispers, if you're smart enough to listen, they've shown you the truth. Now it's your turn. I stayed there until the sun dipped below the horizon, shivering, silent, collecting pieces of myself in the dimming light. Alone, exposed, hurt, but awake. The cold realization settled deep in my bones. I would never be naive again, not with them, not with anyone. And somewhere in that hurt, somewhere in that betrayal, a plan began to form. I would remember every laugh, every smirk, every locked door, and I would repay it. Days passed, hours melted into each other, marked only by the sound of my own restless breathing. The silence from inside the house gnawed at me, a constant hollow echo. I dialed their numbers again. Mom, Dad. No answer. Voicemail. Always voicemail. I slammed my phone onto the dashboard of my car. Why one set they answer, I whispered, my voice small in the empty car. What did I do? No reply. I started replaying everything, every word, every glance, every sarcastic comment I'd brushed off as harmless. I remembered Mom saying, "Are you sure you can handle that?" when I wanted to lead a project at work. The tone, soft, almost caring, was really a blade. Dad's sighs whenever I tried to explain something he didn't want to hear. Those tiny betrayals, all stitched together, suddenly formed a tapestry I couldn't unsee. Was I never enough? I muttered to myself, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I thought of every time I had bent over backward for them, Every report card, every achievement, every success they had smiled at or pretended to notice, was it ever really mine? Or just something to validate them, to feed their pride? I leaned back, staring at the ceiling of my car, the streetlight casting long cold shadows. My chest felt hollow, empty, broken. I heard Dad Sting's voice from the past, low and controlled. "You always think you know better." I imagined Mom's smirk, subtle but sharp, whenever I spoke up at family dinners. Every word I'd spoken, every thought I'd shared, they had been quietly measured, judged, dismissed. I touched my face. Tears had streaked my cheeks, but I hadn't noticed. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked unfamiliar, smaller, fragile. I whispered into the empty car, "Did I ever matter?" No answer. The locked doors weren't just physical anymore. They were everywhere. Their indifference, their subtle contempt, their quiet superiority. I realized the betrayal wasn't just about being shut out today. It was about years of being underestimated, belittled, ignored. Every laugh, every dismissal, every passive-aggressive remark, they had been practicing for this moment. I remembered the morning they warned me. Mom's eyes, sharp and unspoken. Dad's silence. I hadn't listened. I thought I knew better. I hadn't realized I was walking into the culmination of all their tiny cruelties. I hit the steering wheel, shaking with rage and heartbreak. Why? The sound echoed in the empty car, a hollow, empty echo. I tried calling again. No one answered. I left messages I knew they wouldn't must return. I screamed into the voicemail, "I am not invisible. I am not nothing." And then silence. I sat under the streetlight, feeling exposed, vulnerable. Like the night itself had stripped me bare. I cried, not just for today or the locked doors, but for every moment they had ever made me feel small, incapable, unworthy. Was I ever good enough? I whispered again. I pressed my head against the steering wheel, my confidence, which had always been my shield, cracked under the weight of their indifference. They questioned everything. Every decision, every ambition, every dream. But even in the midst of despair, something flickered. A tiny ember, buried under tears and fury. I realized they thought they had broken me, that their disregard had won, but every ounce of this betrayal was fueling something darker, something stronger. "I will remember this," I muttered to the night. "I will remember every laugh, every glance, every lock, every word." The tears blurred my vision. The streetlight glared down, cold and indifferent, but beneath the heartbreak, beneath the self-doubt, beneath the exhaustion, a quiet fury burned. Silent, patient, waiting. I didn't move for a long time, just sat there, letting the grief and anger wash over me. The world outside was oblivious, passing cars reflecting my hollow eyes back at me. I realized something essential. The collapse I felt wasn't the end. It was the beginning. They had underestimated me, dismissed me, belittled me, but I was still here, still thinking, still feeling. And that mattered. I wiped my cheeks on my sleeve, took a deep breath, and whispered, This isn't set over, not by a long shot." The streetlight flickered above me, and for the first time in days I felt the faintest pulse of control. Power was coming. Revenge was coming. I just had to survive the night. And I would. I couldn't stay broken. Not anymore. Every tear, every sleepless night, every pang of self-doubt had done its work. And now, it had awoken something fierce inside me. Quiet, cold, precise. I remember sitting in my car, staring at the house from across the street, watching them move around inside. Laughing, talking, living, as if none of it mattered, as if none of it had ever hurt me. And that's when it hit me. They had weaknesses. Small cracks in their perfection. Flaws they didn't see, or thought I couldn't see. Mom, she carried secrets like trophies. Little lies, small manipulations, careful omissions. I saw her at dinner, dropping hints, weaving half-truths like spider silk. "I was just worried about you," she'd say. Voice soft, eyes sharp. The lie was elegant, but I noticed. Dad? Pride, a mountain of it. He hid behind it, demanded respect, dismissed anyone who questioned him. "You'll understand one day," he'd say, every word a brick in the wall he built between us. That wall had a door. I just needed to find it. Sister. Arrogance, confidence masquerading as superiority. Every smirk, every teasing remark, every laugh was an arrow aimed at me. But arrogance is fragile. It bends under pressure. I started observing them. Quietly, patiently, like a shadow moving in a room full of light. I noticed patterns, routines, tics, the way Mom bit her lip when she was hiding something, the way Dad's eyes flicked to the door when I mentioned plans he didn't approve of. My sister's laughter, always slightly too loud, masking insecurity. I whispered to myself. In the dark of my apartment, Yusef underestimated me, all these years, and Isev watched. Isev learned. Every night became a lesson. Every conversation, a puzzle. Every glance, a clue. I wasn't just observing, I was cataloging, memorizing, understanding their strengths. Yes. But more importantly, their weaknesses. I remember sitting at my desk one night, coffee cold beside me, laptop open, scribbling notes into a tattered notebook. Mom, ego, control, secrets. Dad, pride, impatience, arrogance. Sister, vanity, fear of exposure, overconfidence. My hand shook with the thrill of clarity. I was building a map, a blueprint. I realized something crucial: the same family who had humiliated me could also be outmaneuvered. And I made a decision, a vow to myself. I wouldn't beg for acceptance. I wouldn't apologize for existing. I wouldn't ask for love or approval. I would show them. Show them that locking me out didn't break me. It awakened me. I whispered into the night, "You thought this was the end. You thought I sped crumble, but I said just begun." The next weeks were quiet, but they were mine. Every late night spent researching, planning, and learning how to wield influence became secret preparation. I devoured books on negotiation, persuasion, subtle manipulation, and strategy. I studied human behavior. I practiced patience. I honed my mind like a weapon. Every move counts, I muttered one night, pacing my apartment, notebook clutched to my chest. Every word, every glance, every silence. I tested myself. Small experiments, conversations where I planted seeds just to watch reactions, adjusted, adapted, learned. Each success was intoxicating, each small victory a spark that grew into fire. I remembered the locked door, the laughter, the smirks. Every humiliation fed this fire. "This isn't stat revenge yet," I whispered to the dark. "This is preparation, observation, knowledge, power." I started imagining the moment I would finally strike, not with violence but with precision. I would dismantle the barriers they built around themselves, their pride, their arrogance, their illusions of control, and I would stand at the center, calm, collected, victorious. I caught myself smiling in the dark, quietly, almost menacingly, not out of malice but because I felt alive. For the first time in years I was the one in control. The hunter, the strategist, not the victim. Mom, Dad, my sister, they had believed they could define me, limit me, cage me. I whispered again, barely audible, "You thought you could break me. You only made me stronger." Every night I slept with one thought looping in my mind: patience, precision, timing. Every morning I woke earlier than them, reviewing my notes, planning the day, thinking 3 steps ahead. The house, the family, their lives. They were pieces on a board, and I was learning how to move them. I didn't rush. I couldn't. Rushed revenge is sloppy, amateurish. I wanted art, poetic justice, a reckoning so clean and precise it would leave them stunned, exposed, powerless. I traced their patterns like a cartographer, tracing dangerous terrain. I cataloged secrets, habits, vulnerabilities. I memorized each word they used, the tone of their laughter, the timing of their smiles. Every detail mattered. And in that careful observation, in that quiet fury, I realized this was no longer about hurt. It was about justice. Karmic, inevitable, unflinching. I leaned back in my chair, the night thick around me. The spark of revenge was no longer a flicker. It was a flame, controlled, focused, waiting. I whispered to the shadows, "Soon you'll see what I can do." And for the first time in months I slept without doubt, without fear, with only determination. The reckoning was coming. And I would be ready. I started small, invisible at first, watching, listening, learning. They never suspected. Not once. I smiled at the neighbor while collecting my mail. "Hey, nice weekend," I said, casual. They smiled back, unsuspecting. I noted the little things they mentioned: gossip, family patterns, who they trusted. Everything became data. Everything became a tool. I reached out to a family friend next. Someone Dad trusted implicitly. Over coffee, I laughed at their stories, nodded at their opinions. "Oh, really? I didn't know that," I said. Careful, deliberate. Every question, every laugh, every compliment was a probe, and each response revealed another corner of their world. My sister came next. She was reckless, overconfident, and socially brazen. "Hey, I love your dress. Where'd you get it?" I asked innocently one afternoon. When I ran into her at the cafe she frequented, she beamed, shared details, and I wrote it all down in my mental ledger. Patterns, friends, habits, weaknesses. Mom, of course, was more subtle. She guarded her routines, her finances, her pride, but no one is flawless. Even she had cracks. I noticed the way she hesitated when mentioning a purchase, the way she watched her spending in the corners of her eyes. I cataloged it all, silently, every bank detail, every indulgence, every hidden corner of her life. Dad's pride was predictable. He spoke loudly in front of neighbors, boasting of decisions and victories. "I handled it myself," he'd say, chest puffed out. I watched, memorized, and filed away. Every miscalculation, every ego-driven choice, became ammunition. I started inserting myself into their routines, showing up where they didn't expect me. A smile here, a friendly hello there. "Hi, didn't see you at the market yesterday," I'd say to my sister's friends. She'd laugh, thinking I was harmless. I made sure they all liked me, trusted me, relied on my counsel, all without revealing an ounce of my intent. I whispered to myself in the quiet of my apartment, "They don't know. They never saw it coming." Every encounter became a chess move. I smiled at the family friend while subtly questioning Dad's decisions. I complimented Mom on her taste while noting which expenses were unnecessary. I listened to my sister's friends like a hawk, hearing stories that exposed her arrogance, her insecurities. "Did you hear what she did last weekend?" a friend of hers asked, laughing. I nodded, feigned surprise, and stored it away. Each story, each slip, each laugh became part of a map I was building. I started to see the web, the cracks, the skeletons behind their perfect masks, and with every new observation, my power grew, quiet, unseen, insidious. One evening, at a small neighborhood gathering, my sister approached me, full of confidence. "You've been everywhere lately. Making friends, huh?" I smiled, tilting my head innocently, just trying to be sociable. Her laugh was loud, carefree. "Be careful, people talk." I nodded, eyes steady. "I know, but sometimes listening is more important than talking." She didn't know I wasn't just listening. I was absorbing, cataloging, learning how to bend her world without her realizing it. Mom came by, asking me to help organize a small charity event. "You have such a way with people," she said. "It'd all be nice to have your help." I smiled, masking every shred of intent. Of course, I'd love to. Every small interaction reinforced what I knew. The power of revenge wasn't in confrontation. It wasn't in shouting, slamming doors, or making threats. It was in strategy, patience, precision, letting them dig their own holes while I stood in the shadows, quietly pulling the strings. I spent nights mapping it all out in my mind. Every friend, every ally, every flaw, every secret. I visualized the dominoes, the inevitable chain of events that would bring them to the edge without ever realizing who was guiding them there. "Soon," I whispered one night, staring at the ceiling. "Soon, it all makes sense. Soon, they shall see, and I shall be untouchable." I started feeling the thrill, not from malice, but from empowerment. Every smile I gave, every question I asked, every story I heard built my arsenal. I could almost see the future, each piece moving exactly as it should. A neighbor invited me for tea. Dad was talking about a new investment. I leaned in, asked casual questions, and noticed every hesitation, every brag, every misstep, notes stored, patterns forming, advantage gained. Sister bragged about a weekend party she threw. I laughed, asked about guests, listened carefully. One careless comment, one tiny slip, and the puzzle pieces clicked. Mom whispered to a friend about a purchase she regretted. I noted the vendors, the timing, the amounts, small details, but the cracks were becoming visible. By the end of the week, I had their lives mapped in my mind, Every prideful decision, every secret, every flaw catalogued. I knew where to apply pressure. I knew which strings to pull. I knew how to orchestrate chaos without them ever suspecting. I whispered to the shadows of my apartment, smiling faintly, a dangerous calm settling in my chest. The game is theirs to play. But I know every rule, I know every weakness, and soon, I will be the one setting the board. The spark of revenge was no longer just a flicker, it was a controlled, simmering fire, patient, calculated, waiting for the perfect moment to ignite. And I was ready. The first blow wasn't loud. It was quiet, surgical, perfect. I smiled to myself that morning, sipping my coffee, thinking about how far I'd come. Every observation, every note, every late night of planning, it all led to this. My sister came in, hair perfect, confidence blazing. "Did you see what Jenna posted?" she asked, scrolling her phone. I nodded innocently. "Oh? What step's wrong?" She laughed, unaware. "Nothing. Just funny stuff. You wouldn't get it." I leaned back, careful, casual. "I think I do. Sometimes secrets slip, huh?" She paused, curious, suspicious, but I didn't reveal anything. Not yet, just a smile, a tilt of the head, a quiet assurance that I was harmless. Hours later, whispers started. A friend of hers called, concerned. "Hey, I think someone saw your posts. They stir circulating." I watched from a distance, savoring the moment, her face the way it paled, the shift from arrogance to shock. It was electric. "What? What do you mean?" she stammered, voice shaking. "Maybe you should check your profile," I said softly. She ran to her phone, eyes wide, scrolling frantically. I stayed calm, silent, the observer of the storm I'd conjured. Later at a family gathering, Mom was boasting about a business deal. "I managed the entire transaction myself. Everyone said it couldn't be done," she said, voice proud, eyes shining. I smiled, nodding. "That SEP's impressive, Mom. But didn't said I see a discrepancy in the statements the other day." Her eyes flicked to me, sharp and suspicious. "Discrepancy?" "Oh, just a small detail," I said, casual, letting it hang in the air. No accusations, no confrontation, just implication. By dinner, the whispers had started. Quiet, insistent, questions from relatives, curious glances. Mom's perfect facade cracking ever so slightly. "Is that true?" a cousin asked, voice soft but pointed. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. It's complicated," she murmured. I sat back, heart racing with quiet triumph. They had created this. Every boast, every prideful claim, every careless slip, it was all their doing. And now, reality was bending around them, exposing the cracks I had catalogued for months. Later, I watched my sister again. She was defensive, arguing with friends. "I didn't sat to be mean it like that. You don't sat understand?" I whispered to myself, almost tenderly. "You dug your own hole, and you didn't even see me standing there watching." No one suspected me. Not my sister, not my mother. They laughed at the beginnings of the chaos, thinking it was coincidence, thinking it was bad luck. I relished their confusion, their disbelief, their slow realization that the world they thought they controlled was shifting beneath their feet. You did this?" My sister whispered to me later, face pale, voice trembling. I shook my head, expression neutral. "Did what?" Her eyes narrowed, searching for betrayal, for anger, for anything. "This, the rumors, the everything." I smiled faintly. "Sometimes the cracks show themselves. You just have to notice." Mom confronted me quietly that night. "Are you enjoying this?" she asked, voice tight, eyes wary. I leaned in, calm, steady. "Not enjoying, observing. You taught me to pay attention to details, to notice flaws. You taught me, without even knowing it." Her face went pale. She realized too late that every careless word, every boast, every small manipulation had been catalogued, every weakness stored, every prideful act documented. I whispered to myself as I walked away, alone in the night. The first blow is the sweetest, and its steps just the beginning. Every glance, every whisper, every rumor I let spread became a weapon, not violent, not loud, but devastating, precise, poetic, just enough to make them question reality. They had built their lives on perfection, on control, on superiority, and they didn't see the hand that was quietly undoing it all. By the time the family noticed the shift, it was too late. The cracks were visible. The masks had fallen. Pride, arrogance, secrets. They were exposed, and I stood outside, silent, watching the consequences unfold. I whispered again, voice low, almost reverent. You taught me everything. You showed me how to strike without fighting. And now, you shall see. That night, I sat alone, savoring the electric thrill of the first blow. Not from malice, not from cruelty, but from justice. Karmic, inevitable, satisfying. I wasn't stet done, not even close. But the first strike had landed, and the sweet, quiet satisfaction of poetic justice filled me. They would remember this moment. The sting of betrayal without a culprit. The chaos that came from their own mistakes. And I would be the calm observer, the quiet orchestrator, the invisible hand guiding it all. I leaned back, letting the silence settle around me, my heart still racing, a fire burning quietly inside. The first blow was done, and it tasted perfect. I remember the living room like it was a battlefield, the same one where I had once been locked out. The walls, the furniture, every corner, it all felt smaller, heavier, suffocating with memories of humiliation. I stepped inside, my heart beat loud, echoing in my chest. They were there, Mom, Dad, my sister, smiling, unsuspecting, thinking I was still fragile. Hey, my sister said, breezy as if nothing had happened. I didn't answer. Not yet. I let my eyes sweep over them. Every smirk, every prideful posture, every careless glance, they didn't know what was coming. Are you okay? Mom asked, voice soft, almost nervous. I smiled faintly, a predator's smile. I've never been better, I said, and the words carried weight. I took a deep breath. This was it. The reckoning, every detail I had catalogued, every weakness I had uncovered, every small humiliation they had inflicted, I was ready to lay it bare. I need you to listen. All of you. Really listen, I said, voice steady but trembling with rage. Dad frowned, chest tight, suspicion rising. What are you talking about? I walked slowly toward the center of the room. Do you remember the morning I was locked out? My voice was quiet, almost casual, but it cut like a blade. Mom blinked, uneasy. Yes. No interruptions, I said, raising a hand. Not yet. I want you to understand everything. I began, every slight, every sarcastic remark, every laugh at my expense, every door slammed, every dismissal. I listed them methodically, one by one. You laughed when I tried to speak, I said, voice breaking slightly. You mocked my achievements. You minimized me. You made me feel invisible. My sister shifted, uncomfortable. I didn't set mean. You didn't stet care. I cut her off. And that steps the point. Every time I tried to matter to you, you let me fall. Dad's face tightened. You scepter exaggerating. We never. I have proof, I said calmly, my tone slicing through the tension. I pulled out evidence, messages, photos, witnesses I had spoken to, people who had seen the patterns, the subtle cruelties. I laid it all on the table, one by one, letting the weight of reality settle in. Mom gasped. This I didn't set realize. You did realize, I said, eyes burning. You just didn't set care enough to stop. The room went silent, heavy, suffocating silence. Not a word, not a defense, just the realization sinking in. You underestimated me, I whispered, letting the words hang like smoke. You thought I stet crumble, that I stet beg for acceptance, that I stet be small forever. But look at me now. I took a step closer. I am not broken, I am not invisible, and you will never control me again. My sister Sep's voice wavered. Why are you doing this? I shook my head slowly. Because I need you to see what you created. Every sneer, every dismissal, every secret laugh at my expense, it brought us here, not me. You did this. I just followed the map you left for me. Mom tried to speak again, but I silenced her with a look. Not now, not until you hear everything. Every manipulation, every hypocrisy, every hidden insult. And I spoke. Long, deliberate, raw, about the social media slip, the financial missteps, the arrogance, the pride, the invisible chains they wrapped around me for years. I let it all out, letting the emotions seep into every word. Rage, Pain, vulnerability, power. You thought the world would protect you from reality, I said, pacing slowly. But reality is harsh, and it doesn't stick care about your pride. It doesn't stick care about your status. It only cares about truth. Dad's jaw was tight. Mom's lips pressed together. My sister's eyes wide, unblinking. They couldn't deflect, couldn't twist this. Every lie, every deflection, every excuse had been accounted for, every truth laid bare. I let you see me, fully. And this is what I see in return, I said, voice rising, shaking with the weight of every pent-up year. You thought you could diminish me, humiliate me, and now, you see me. The room was electric with tension, heavy with acknowledgement, heavy with shame. Mom whispered finally, almost inaudible, I didn't set no it hurt you this much. I looked at her, tears threatening, but held back. You didn't set want to know, I said softly. You wanted to keep me small, that Sep's the betrayal, that Sep's what this was always about. My sister Sip's voice cracked. I didn't Sept realize. You never do, until it's too late, I said. I let a pause hang, let the silence press down, heavier than any punishment I could have delivered. The realization that they had underestimated me completely, that they had built their lives on pride and cruelty, and now, they were facing the consequences. I took a step back, calm, steady, composed. I step and done being a victim, I whispered, and you will remember this moment. Not because I wanted to hurt you, but because you forced me to see the truth, about us, about you, about me. I walked toward the door, leaving them standing there, stunned, speechless, exposed. And for the first time in years I felt complete. Not because of revenge itself, but because I had taken my power back, I had reclaimed my voice. My truth, my place in my own life, I whispered softly as I left the room. This is the beginning of the end and the start of me. By now, I held the narrative. The room no longer felt heavy with memories of my past humiliation, it felt like mine. Every glance, every word, every subtle gesture was mine to control. I watched them from across the table one evening. Mom, Dad, my sister, each moving cautiously, testing the waters, unsure, they had learned something crucial. I was no longer small. I was no longer powerless. Are you really serious about this? My sister asked, voice wavering, edge of fear creeping in. I smiled faintly. Yes. And no, I said some serious about myself, about my life, about boundaries you never respected. Her eyes narrowed. Boundaries? You mean revenge? I shook my head slowly. No, not revenge. Justice, recognition, reality. I stem not here to hurt you, I stem here to exist in my truth, and to make sure you acknowledge it. Mom tried to interrupt, her voice soft but tense. We just want things to go back to normal. I leaned back, calm, deliberate. Normal? Do you mean the version of normal where I stem invisible? Where my voice is small? That normal doesn't exist anymore, and I stem done pretending it does. Dad Spid's jaw tightened. You think you star in charge now? I let the words hang. Then I said quietly, not think, no. The shift had been subtle, almost imperceptible at first. Every carefully placed observation, every secret revealed, every humiliation turned into leverage. It had been building toward this moment, and now they felt it. Mom's eyes flicked away, avoiding mine. My sister's fingers twisted nervously in her lap. Dad's voice faltered, pride bruised, ego shaken. You've changed, my sister said finally. I didn't expect this. I didn't expect it either, I admitted softly. I expected myself to break, but I didn't. I expected to be small, powerless, insignificant, and I refused it, so I rebuilt myself. Quietly, patiently, strategically. Mom whispered, almost inaudible, You've taken control. I nodded. Control? Yes, but not over you, over the story, over the truth, over what happens next. That Sep's the power I claimed, and it Sep's not fragile, not fleeting, it Sep's mine. Every conversation, every family gathering, every small decision now carried my authority. I didn't have to raise my voice, I didn't have to demand respect, I simply existed in the space I had carved for myself, and they adjusted, slowly, reluctantly, but inevitably. Are we expected to comply? Dad asked finally, pride still wrestling with fear. I tilted my head. Calm. Not comply. Acknowledge. Respect. Recognize that the child you tried to break has grown, that the person you underestimated is no longer invisible, that the person you mocked has created her own reality. My sister Sip's voice wavered again. And if we don't set? I smiled faintly. Then the consequences aren't set mine to deliver. They step yours. Reality has a way of teaching lessons. I simply point out the paths you Sep built for yourselves. They swallowed, quiet. The weight of recognition settled in, a silent acknowledgement that the balance had changed. I remember sitting later watching them adjust, watching them interact with me differently, not openly submissive, not with fear, but with a cautious respect they hadn't afforded me before. Every small nod, every slight hesitation, every careful smile was a reminder the game had changed. I whispered to myself as I observed, "This is it. This is the moment where I am no longer the shadow in the room. I am seen. I am acknowledged. I am power." The satisfaction wasn't loud. It wasn't gloating. It was quiet. Steady, controlled, empowering. Mom asked me one night, voice tentative, will things ever be normal between us? I looked at her, eyes steady, calm. Normal? Maybe. But not the normal you remember. Not the normal where I disappear. Not the normal where my worth depends on your recognition. The new normal is one where I exist fully, unapologetically, and you adjust. She nodded slowly, a mixture of resignation and understanding in her eyes. I watched my sister mimic the same cautious acknowledgement. "I understand," she said quietly. And Dad finally spoke in a low, measured voice. "We see you now." I smiled faintly, letting it settle in. Then we are all in the same reality. From that day on, every interaction carried my quiet authority. I didn't have to prove myself anymore. My accomplishments, my independence, my control over the narrative, they spoke louder than any words. I walked through the house differently. I spoke differently. I existed differently. They adjusted around me. Not perfectly, not without resistance, but the shift was undeniable. I whispered softly as I passed through the hallway, alone for a moment. This is the balance. The power isn't sus stole, it's sus in control, in knowledge, in presence, in being the one who holds the narrative. Every smile I received now, every careful conversation, every cautious decision, they were acknowledgments. Silent, steady, undeniable. The power had shifted, permanently. And I savored it. I watched them carefully, letting the silence stretch. They moved differently now, smaller, cautious, weighed down by something they hadn't expected, regret. Mom avoided my gaze. She hovered near the kitchen, hands twisting the dish towel, eyes darting away every time I looked at her. "I didn't mean for things to go this far," she whispered once, almost to herself. I let her words linger in the air. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. Her voice carried the shame she could no longer hide. Dad cleared his throat, standing a little straighter, trying to project authority he no longer owned. "I, we, I want to make things right," he said, eyes scanning me, searching for the obedience I would never give again. I shook my head slowly. "You can set fix what you Sep ignored for years," I said softly, letting the weight of the truth settle. Respect isn't set earned by fear, or guilt, or last-minute apologies. It's Sep's earned by acknowledging what you Sep done. My sister, sitting across from the table, fidgeted with her phone, a nervous habit I had noticed months ago but had now become a telltale sign. Her arrogance, once impenetrable, cracked under the pressure of realization. "I didn't think you'd actually notice," she murmured, voice trembling. I let a faint smile creep onto my face. "Notice, I catalogued everything. Every slight, every laugh, every careless word, every moment you thought I wouldn't stay." She looked up, eyes wide. You remembered all that." I nodded, every single detail, and I used it wisely, not out of cruelty, but to show the consequences of neglect, mockery, and dismissal. Mom Sip's shoulders sagged. I wish we could go back," she said, voice breaking. "I wish we had seen you, truly seen you." I leaned back, calm, letting the words sink. "You had years to see me, to listen, to care. But you chose indifference. That choice shaped everything." Dad Sep's lips pressed into a thin line. I understand. I misjudged you." Not misjudged, I said softly. Quiet but sharp. Underestimated. And that step's worse. Because you thought you could predict me, control me, diminish me, and I proved you wrong. My sister's voice cracked again. I feel foolish. I thought I knew the game. I thought I was clever. But you, she trailed off, eyes wide with disbelief and dawning shame. I didn't gloat. Didn't need to. The recognition in their eyes, the silent internalization of what they'd done, was far more satisfying than any verbal victory. You're changed, Mom whispered finally, voice low tinged with fear. I nodded. Isep always been me. But now, Isep seen. Heard recognized. And you shall remember this, not because I humiliated you but because your own choices exposed the truth. The room was quiet, heavy with the weight of unspoken admissions. Their apologies halting and awkward were hollow. But the acknowledgement was undeniable. They could not undo what had been done. They could only accept it. Dad muttered finally. We should have supported you. Believed in you. Trusted you. You didn't I said softly, voice calm but unwavering. And now you know the cost of underestimating me. The cost of arrogance, indifference, and exclusion. Mom Sup's eyes glistened. I see that now. And it hurts. I let a quiet smile touch my lips. Good. Because understanding the weight of your actions, that is the lesson. My sister looked down, biting her lip, silent. Her pride was shattered, replaced by something raw and human awareness. I didn't need to punish them. The subtle internalized consequences were far more effective. Karma had arrived, not loud, not violent, but lasting, quiet, permanent, internalized. I whispered to myself, almost reverently, this is the reckoning they never saw coming. Not through confrontation, not through argument, but through their own reflection, their own realization, their own regret. And I felt a quiet satisfaction, not of gloating, not of revenge for its own sake, but the satisfaction that truth had been revealed, lessons had been learned, and the balance had shifted, permanently. They had feared my judgment, and now they carried it, not in words, not in punishment, but in every glance, every hesitation, every acknowledgement of the person they had wronged. I exhaled slowly. The storm was over. The power had shifted. I was no longer the invisible one. I was the observer, the one who had survived, the one who had outsmarted them. And in that quiet moment, I knew subtlety had delivered the most lasting justice of all. I stood at the threshold of the old house one last time. The doors, once locked against me, now meant nothing. The walls that had echoed with laughter at my expense, the hallways that had confined me to their judgments, they no longer held power. I took a deep breath. This is it, I whispered to myself. This is freedom. I remembered the mornings of fear, the afternoons of doubt, the nights spent replaying every insult, and I remembered the rage, quiet at first, then growing, sharpening, molding me into someone I barely recognized, someone stronger. Mom appeared in the doorway, hesitant. Are you leaving? I met her gaze, calm but unwavering. I stum leaving the version of this house that belonged to you. I stum taking the version of my life that belongs to me. She swallowed, unsure. But the family we. I shook my head slowly. The family that existed in fear and control, that version doesn't set to exist for me anymore. You can watch, you can witness, but it doesn't set to define me. Dad stepped forward, voice low, restrained. You Sep's changed. I smiled faintly, quietly, a predator-sessed satisfaction softened by peace. Isef grown, Isef survived, Isef learned, and Isef risen. You underestimated me, dismissed me, laughed at me, but Isef become my own force, my own story, my own world. My sister's six lips pressed into a thin line. I never thought you stead come this far. I chuckled softly, a sound that carried years of restrained fury, now transformed into liberation. Neither did I at first, but I found strength in what you all denied me. I turned betrayal into fuel, humiliation into strategy, pain into empowerment. I walked slowly through the living room, letting my eyes trace the furniture, the walls, the remnants of a past that no longer bound me. These doors, I said, gesturing toward the entrance, they once locked me out, now, they separ irrelevant, they never held me. I held myself all along. Mom Sup's voice wavered. Do you forgive us? I stopped, thoughtful. Forgiveness is instead about you. It steps about me. I don't stet need to carry anger anymore. I don't stet need to live in resentment. I steps built myself beyond that. That steps my peace. Dad exhaled slowly. And the years, all those years you felt small. I was never small, I said firmly. You made me feel small, but feeling small and being small are not the same. I chose to rise, even when every hand, every word, every look tried to push me down. My sister Sep's voice broke, tentative. Will you still be part of our lives? I smiled softly, not cruelly. I will be part of my life. You may be part of it if you respect who I sept become. If not, that sept's your choice. But I will not shrink for anyone again. I turned toward the door, each step deliberate, a symbolic reclaiming of power. I paused, hand on the knob. This is the final lesson, I whispered. Your walls, your judgments, your attempts to control, they no longer matter. I matter. My story matters. My life matters. The air shifted as I opened the door. Sunlight spilled in, warm and inviting, spilling over the floor that had once felt like a cage. I stepped out slowly, savoring the light, the freedom, the space that was mine. Look at me now, I said quietly, to no one but myself, feeling the weight of the past fall away. Unshaken, unbroken, unstoppable. I walked down the driveway, each step a statement. The betrayal could not bind me, humiliation could not define me, pain could not halt me. I was moving forward, unstoppable, unstoppable, unstoppable. I looked back one last time. The house loomed silently, holding the echoes of their regret, their shame, their quiet recognition of what they had lost. But their acknowledgement was irrelevant. I didn't need it. I had my own narrative now. The wind brushed past me as I walked further. A reminder that life moves, that it waits for no one, that I could write, live, and own every chapter of my story from this moment onward. I whispered into the open air. I rose from the ashes they created, and I felt never look back the same way again. The sun fell across my face. Warm, bright, free. I was alive, powerful, whole, and nothing, not laughter, not doors, not years of neglect, could take that away. I was no longer their shadow. I was my own light.